Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome back to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. We're your hosts, Thomas
and Jeremiah.
Today, we are talking all about rivalries. We've done some kind of historical deep dive stuff before. We did Formula One families, where we looked at some duos like father-son, brothers, cousins, that kind of thing. But today's a little bit different. We are going back in time for these, but we're going to be looking at certain year ranges where there was just two guys going at it, and they were the clear, dominators of that era of Formula One. And so hopefully we can provide some maybe context that you weren't aware of, maybe give you some insight if you're a newer fan like us to 80s, 90s, 2000s Formula One. But Jeremiah is going to kick us off with probably one of the most epic rivalries of all time.
So we talked about this already in our McLaren episode, but today we're going to actually look a little bit further into this. So we're going to be going over the rivalry of Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. Arguably one of the best of all time.
Yeah, big names.
So we're going to start with Prost, the Frenchman.
The Esteban Ocon of his day.
Oh, yeah, some might say. At 14, so check this out. Him and his family go on vacation, or as you Europeans call holiday.
Holiday. Just like we're going to university.
Yeah. So they go on vacation, and Alain Prost gets introduced to karting. Now, at this point, he's already an athletic kid. He's into football, which, is actually soccer. But he's into wrestling, and I want to say there was one other, but it skips my mind. Regardless, though, he is a very athletic child. He's involved in a lot of sports. Doesn't find karting until 14 while he's on vacation.
Probably late even for this time.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Hey, we found karting at 25.
Some might say late. I think we're right on schedule. So plays around with this, but in 1975 he actually gets a chance, or 1974 he enters karting as like an actual racer. 1975, he's already winning the French Senior Karting Championship, giving him the opportunity to race in Formula Renault, which is awesome. So apparently, like, the winner of this karting championship got the opportunity to have a contract in Formula Renault.
Sure, so kind of like an automatic promotion.
Right.
Hey, do X, you get promoted to this league.
Right, so you're going to basically the winner of this karting championship. Congratulations, you're now in single-seater racing. Now at the lower levels, but still, here's your seat.
Sure.
So he takes this, dominates. And when I say dominates, I mean he wins 12 out of 13 races.
It sounds like the typical beginning of a legend. We've looked at Max Verstappen's record, and you see Oscar Piastri as he enters the sport now. There's the guys that meddle around in those lower leagues, and sometimes they'll make it up or whatever, but there's always the one that just comes in and wins.
Yes. And that was him, 100%. We're in 1976, by the way. That's when he actually won the 12 out of 13 races.
From what league would this
so
be
he was
considered?
So he was in Formula Renault, right? But at the time, you have to understand that there's no Formula 2, there's no Formula 3. So I stand corrected. He actually did participate. So he bounced around a lot, but he was winning multiple championships going through it all.
Okay.
He enters European Formula 2, where he doesn't get to do much. He does 2 races, but he doesn't get any points or anything like that. It's kind of lackluster. In that very next year, though, he does the French Formula 3 and European Formula 3. He takes first in the French Formula 3, by the way.
For context, the 70s and 80s F1 or Formula sports in general were very decentralized.
It's
and
all
so
over the
as
place.
you try to find articles or write-ups about these guys, it's never like, oh, here's the Formula 2 standings. Here's the German Formula 2 standings for this half season in fall. And you're like, what is happening?
Right.
But they're all considered like the same ground, but it was very regionalized in those middle years of F1. It wasn't the early years. Early years would have been 50s, 60s, but kind of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, very decentralized.
Oh, absolutely. So we talked about 1978. He was in the French and European Formula 3, won the French Formula 3 championship. Very next year, 1979, he does the same thing. He's in the European and the French Formula 3. Wins both of them.
Yeah.
Wins both championships. And it's not like he did like 2 or 3 races for one of them. No, he did 5 for the French Formula 3, won it, and did 10 for the European Formula 3, won it.
At this point, is he on any F1 team's radar?
Possibly. So I know he is. Because the very next year, McLaren comes calling. Yeah. Now, granted, at this time, McLaren is still not really that well known. They're still getting their grips. They're getting everything together. This was 79 or 80. I'm sorry. They're trying to see where they're going to take this team going forward. Not a good look, as out of 13 races, he doesn't win any, doesn't get any poles, no fastest laps, and gets 5 points for a failing McLaren team.
Sounds like Zhou Guan Yu.
Which, at the time, only a handful of drivers are even able to score points in Formula One, and he's one of them. In his rookie season, he gets 5 points. So if you look at it from that perspective, great. But it's the fact that he was racing for McLaren, which, as we know what they become, he's finishing in 16th in the standings.
And it's got to be tough, too. So, like I mentioned Oscar Piastri. Literally every feeder series Piastri went to, he won the first year he was in it. And then suddenly you go to the big leagues and you can't. It's not the same.
It's a different league.
Every other time you've been promoted, you cracked it. You figured it out. You go to Formula One. Well, what are these guys doing? Yeah.
Well, it's because the best teams already have drivers. So it's, why do we need you?
Right.
So he gets a chance with McLaren. Comes in 16th his rookie season. So he bounces from McLaren. We're now in 1981, and he starts his run with Renault, where he's going to be for the next 3 seasons. In Renault, for the Renault team, he doesn't actually do that bad. So we have him finishing 5th, 4th, and then 2nd. So whatever Renault did in that 1983 season, whether it was Alain Prost or it was the actual car manufacturing itself, they seem to have figured it out as he gets 2nd. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very next year, McLaren comes calling again, but this time with a little bit different of a car. So he takes it. This is where things get a little bit saucy. So he takes it, and in his first year with that McLaren team, of the 16 races, he wins 7, takes home 2nd in the standings. Not bad.
Make a lateral move and still get the same result.
Exactly. So that's what leads me to believe that it's all the driver and not the actual car itself.
Possibly.
But back in that time, who was his number one competition? We're in 1984, McLaren, and his number one competition is Niki Lauda. That's his rival for that first season. Yeah. So yeah, he comes in 2nd.
Is he on the back half of his career at this point?
Niki Lauda, yeah. Yes, he's in the back half of his career. He's pretty much done. He's spent his time at Ferrari, and now he's on McLaren. Partners with Alain Prost, and Niki Lauda actually takes the championship. He wins. So Alain Prost gets 2nd, which you're coming 2nd to an F1 legend in your first year on that team. Not the first year with the team, I guess, because his rookie year, but if you don't count that, because he's got the 3 years at Renault, comes back to McLaren, and it's dominant. Gets 2nd in the standings. Not bad. So at this point, Niki Lauda leaves. He's gone. And so we have Alain Prost. Now, I want to say in that first season, he was partnered up with Keke Rosberg.
Okay.
The first year that Niki Lauda left. He wins first. So there's 16 races. He wins 5 of them, which doesn't seem like it would get you the championship. But with only 73 points, you know that this season was very, very close.
I do like going back and looking at the record tables that have all the points, and like no one was getting over 100 points.
No,
because the point system was all weird. Exactly. There was way less races, and but then you look at today, and it's Max Verstappen has 405 points.
Exactly. So for those next 2 seasons, that 85 and 86 season, Prost wins his first and 2nd drivers' championships for McLaren. So he's now a 2-time world champion at McLaren. 87, there's kind of a fall off, and McLaren drops to 4th in the standings. It's very minor, but it happens, right? Okay. So at this point, they're still Marlboro, and it's the very end of the Marlboro color, because at the end of this, they go to Honda. Oh, I'm sorry. That's incorrect. They're still Honda Marlboro, but they go to the Honda engines.
Honda Marlboro.
Right.
The pairing we never knew we needed.
Right. So back-to-back world champion, gets first in 85 and 86, and now he lands in 87 and he finishes fourth. Looks like McLaren needs something new. That's to be continued because now we got to talk about the other half of this rivalry. Yep. And that would be a young Ayrton Senna.
I mean, could have been the greatest of all time. But you're going to get into
that. Without a doubt. Could have been one of the, arguably by some, is the greatest of all time because they go ahead and just give it to him. I mean, and rightfully so. Whenever we go and talk about this, you're going to hear these crazy stories that are told. So, Ayrton Senna, born in 1960. His dad was a landowner, but was also a factory owner. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he grew up, didn't start getting into racing until 13. And the way that he did it was he built a kart with a 1 horsepower lawnmower engine.
He's taking the Toro to the title.
Yeah. He's showing you what real Honda power is.
He's got the old zero turn out there.
Oh, gosh. So in his very first race, he's leading the majority of the race after getting pole. He gets pole in qualifying in this 1 horsepower lawnmower engine.
Sure.
Leading the majority of the race when one of his rivals behind him jump up, tap him, take him out. Very unfortunate. But it looked like he was going to win his very first race ever in a 1 horsepower. I'm going to keep repeating that. 1 horsepower lawnmower engine kart.
I don't think they had Harbor Freight back then.
No. I mean, lawnmower engines now produce what? 8, 10, 12 horsepower?
I think they can get more than that.
15?
Probably.
20?
It's like a Predator.
Why don't you look up what today's Toros are going for in horsepower? And while you look that up, I'm going to go ahead and continue with the story. So, Senna won the South American Kart Championship in 1977, but struggled in the next step up, which was the World Championship. He competed in the World Championship from 78 to 82, but he only finished as highest finishing was runner-up in both 79 and 80.
You know, you're pretty dang close. Push behind lawnmowers 2 to 7 horsepower. Riding lawnmowers 13 to 30. So 2 to 7, you were pretty spot on. 5 to 8 there.
Give me that 13 to 30. Okay, so like I said, 79 and 80, he comes runner up. Well, in 81, Senna makes the move to Europe to start his single-seater racing career. He competed in Formula Ford 1600. Which I guess was just one of the feeder series back then where we have no idea because it changes.
There was a lot of Formula Ford, but there was also Formula Ford regionally. So there was like Formula Ford Germany and France.
Right.
And
then there's Formula Ford 1600, which I have no idea what that's pertaining to.
I don't know what the numbers are.
I mean, regardless, out of the 20 races, he wins 12 in his first single-seater racing season, taking home the championship.
Okay.
So he's already a champion in his first year of single-seater racing. Not too far off from Alain Prost, who also won the championship in his very first season in single-seater.
Like I said, they all have this same kind of, growing up story of finding the sport, going into karting, not working their way through the feeder series, dominating feeder series, whatever they are. And then eventually you have to overlap with the best of the best.
It's ridiculous. It really is. But here's where it gets weirder. So check this out. He just wins the championship in his first year in the feeder series. Very first year in single-seater. At the end of that season, he was feeling pressure from his parents to come home and take over the family business. So he retires.
Oh, no.
Moves back to Brazil. But before
he's got to take care of the goats.
Yeah. But before he got the chance to leave Europe, he's approached by a team in Formula 2000. So check this out. They offer him 10,000 euros to continue racing in Formula 2000, which is a step up. What do you think he does?
Goes home.
No, he takes it, man.
Wait, what year is this?
So at this point, we are in, 1982. 1981 is when he won the actual championship in his first year, and then I guess that's when the conversation with his dad happened. But this move to the Formula 2000 would have been 1982.
Man, that wasn't 10,000 in 1982 is only 22,000 today.
Okay, so it's not as much as I thought.
That is not a lot of money to not go home and help your folks.
Takes the risk, clearly. But the next 2 years saw Senna winning the championship in every racing series he competed in. And I'm not joking when I say this. British Formula Ford 2000 champion. He competed in the European Formula Ford 2000 champion and the British Formula 3 championship where he won champion.
Yep.
All three of those categories, first. Ridiculous. So here again, just like the Alain Prost story, we have this story being told years later, not too far off, but years later, where this guy is coming in through the feeder series and dominating.
And he's being watched. Because they know he's going to be there in the show at some point.
Oh, without a doubt. And in 1983, he gets his opportunity. So in 1983, he tested for multiple F1 teams. Now, remember whenever we were in today's world, if you were to talk about Nick DeVries, and we went over in one of our episodes how he test drove and was a reserve driver for like 50 teams, even though there's only 10.
Yeah, pretty much. He was an F2 test driver, an F3 test driver, all while being an F1 test driver.
Exactly. So get this. Senna tests for Williams, McLaren, Brabham, and Tolman.
Half the grid.
Every single one of them had a problem where they couldn't take him except for Tolman. So with Williams, I believe it was in their contract that for their sponsor, they needed to have a Brit.
There was so many regional contract things back then.
There were so many options like that.
Because they liked the markets. I'll get to one in a minute, but there was a thing where like the FIA wanted a world champion on the grid at all time. So they were making these back alley deals with old F1 champions just to have one on the grid for a season.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, but then they were have like when Schumacher enters the picture, they always wanted a German because they got the German TV market and the German watching market and all that. So now suddenly teams have these clauses where they've got to have a German because they've got a German sponsor. I don't think that happens today.
I would hope not.
Although we did see it a little bit with Haas where he really wanted Mick for the German sponsor money. Remember?
Right.
They were trying to get money and they saw German sponsors.
And they got rid of Mazepin because he was Russian.
Exactly. That was kind of the opposite of that.
I lost my train of thought with that.
Sorry.
We got way off topic. So he test drives for Williams, right? In his test runs, he's quicker than both of their drivers, including Keke Rosberg. That's nuts.
Yeah.
That is absolutely insane. It is his first year. He doesn't even have a seat. He's test driving, and he's faster than their reigning champion, Keke Rosberg.
I would say that's like early Max Verstappen if he was a test driver, just whipping past Lewis Hamilton's time, although that doesn't sound that crazy because you know how good he is now.
Sure.
But at the time when you don't know who a kid is and they're lapping the champion, you're
the reigning champion,
like
the previous year.
You're like, what's going on?
I don't know, man. Some people are just built different, and that's kind of what this whole purpose of me even wanting to talk
Ayrton Senna
about
was
these
built
two.
different.
Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost were built different. Hey guys, this is Jeremiah, co-host of Turn 1 Podcast. We're going to get right back to this week's episode, but first I wanted to let you know where you can go to find us. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Turn 1 Podcast. If you want to check out our audio-only version, you can check us out on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts at Turn 1, a Formula 1 podcast. For any questions, concerns, you can reach us at trn1podcast@gmail.com. All right, let's get back to it. So in 84, he was given his first race seat with Tolman. So 83 season, all the tests, 84, he gets his seat with Tolman. Now, we talked about something that happened in 1984. Do you remember what it was?
They came to Texas on a nice hot July day.
The Dallas Grand Prix. The 1984 Dallas Grand Prix. So this was a statement race for Ayrton Senna. In fact, some people label it, his race engineer, more specifically, calls this his best instance of, I don't know, what would you call greatness?
Sure.
So it's his best instance of greatness that he's ever witnessed from a driver. In the 1984 Dallas Grand Prix, for those that don't remember, Ayrton Senna tapped a wall and had to, first of all, completely spun around, found a way back onto the racetrack to keep going. And he kept pushing, was climbing back through the top, gets towards the top, hits a wall, and is forced to DNF, forced to retire the car.
Was he the car that people came off the track to help push, get back on the track in the middle of the race? Remember those guys jumped over the wall and pushed a car, but it was still a racing car?
I don't think that was this
okay.
Was, but that's funny. So he crashes, goes over to talk to his race engineer afterwards. And his race engineer, who's been a race engineer for multiple drivers, he's heard everything under the sun from his drivers, all kinds of excuses. Never once has he heard what Ayrton Senna walked up to him and said. He said, the wall moved. And that's why he hit the wall. Now, for any logical person, you're going to hear that and go, okay, so you couldn't think of anything else better.
Yeah, the wall.
The wall moved.
Of course it did.
Yeah,
that
for sure,
concrete
for sure.
wall, sure.
But here's the thing. He convinces the race engineer to go with him after the race to the wall that he hit. Now, there had been a collision on that wall before he wrecked into that wall, further down the wall. But since it's all connected concrete blocks, this corner was actually moved by a few millimeters. And he was so precise in how he took these turns that those few millimeters were actually enough for him to clip and retire the car.
Context: if you're picturing today's Armco barriers and tire barriers and the flexible structures of today, where they move when they're hit, and then they kind of spring back into place, or guys come out and fix the barriers. They didn't have that back then. Back then, they had concrete walls. And if there was an accident in the course of the race, not only would they not remove the accident, they wouldn't fix the wall.
No.
And that's why we have a
Race
lot of
on.
that's why, I mean, that's an example of why we have some of the safety standards that we have today, where a race is like yellow flagged or red flagged, because they will come out and they have to fix the wall to its original condition, because these drivers are so on edge. Like you watch, any driver in Jeddah. We can talk about Max Verstappen's great lap,
Right.
but any driver running a good lap is like a millimeter away from those walls if they're running it just right. And if that wall moves a millimeter, and that's their memorized racing line that they can do blindfolded, they're going to hit a wall.
Exactly. And we've seen, what was it, Pierre Gasly, who put on a blindfold and
Yeah.
drove an entire lap around a circuit with the eyes
And
blindfolded.
they are trained to take those apexes like at as close to they can as the limit, and the limit is the wall in this case.
Pretty much.
And so if you, like I said, if it moves a millimeter, that really can destroy your car.
It just baffles me, because this is at a time where there's no telemetry, right? And there's barely any car data that engineers can sit here and track. It's all stuff that they have to measure before and after the races. This man, Ayrton Senna, was a live action in-car telemetry system.
Yeah.
As a driver.
Yep.
It's unreal. The amount of focus and the amount of, communication with his car, I guess you could call it, the way that he could feel everything, it's next level. It blows my mind that he's not considered the GOAT. And like I said, for most people, he is. But it goes further. So in his first season, in that 1984 season, he gets 3 podiums, but would finish in 9th in the standings because he had to retire from 8 races. Now, this is a prime example of what you get when you have a high caliber driver and a low caliber car. You get 3 podiums and 8 retires.
Yep.
But whatever, everybody has their own story. I get it. It's fine. The next 3 years, he makes the move to Lotus, right? Where he would pick up 2 wins in every single season that he was there for Lotus. All 3. Finishes in 4th, 4th, and 3rd. Now, these are his first 4 seasons in F1. And he's already
top 5.
He's already top 5. 1980. So I talked about how he had 2 wins in 85, 86, 87. So this brings us to 88. And he makes his move, where he's going to move from Lotus to join Alain Prost in McLaren. Now, a lot of people will consider this the greatest driver move in F1 history, and to be honest, it's kind of hard to argue with that.
It's a super team of an F1 constructor.
It's a super team, essentially. Yes, McLaren teamed up 2 of the best drivers on the grid and put them on the same team. That's ridiculous. You have Alain Prost, who's already an established driver, and the young up-and-comer Ayrton Senna, who's proving himself in a, what was it? In a lower-end car, getting 4th and 3rd. So this, starts out as a pretty good idea. You have 2 of the best drivers. Senna raced Prost very hard, though, as he was the younger aggressor, kind of like Max and Lewis. Almost identical. So you have Alain Prost, who's this educated, calculated,
tenured
finesse driver, and you have this young up-and-comer who's balls to the wall crazy and is willing to go for any move that's there.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's going to upset Alain Prost, just like it upset Lewis Hamilton. So this caused the friction for the team. The very first season, Senna took home the Drivers' Championship with McLaren. I feel like that's important to note, because that sets what is essentially going to be this whole rivalry. as Alain Prost is this well tenured driver, established, doing his thing. Here comes the up and comer, first year championship. Here's the problem. Ayrton Senna that entire season was dive bombing corners, blocking Prost, and it's not what you want from your drivers. We see this even today with, when you have the Red Bulls racing each other, it's like a respected racing. It's like, okay, nobody get too close. Don't do anything crazy.
Not 5 years ago, Red Bull Max dive bombing Ricardo.
Ricardo, exactly. And that's kind of what I attribute it to as well myself. Senna takes home 8 of the 16 races. Victory is the victor. Prost takes home 7 of the 16, meaning that between the two drivers, there was one race where one of them didn't take home the victory.
And that is the difference in first and second place.
That's ridiculous.
Just wasn't good enough. 7 wins. Okay, sorry, get out of here. Man.
Yeah, 7 wins, more races than most F1 champions in the past prior seasons. But it's okay.
It's more than most F1 drivers will get in a career. Gets it in a season and has to take second.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. So things heat up the very next season. We're at 1989 at the San Marino Grand Prix, where both drivers have agreed that whoever got the better start at the beginning of the race would not be contested for turn 1. That's what it was. Ayrton Senna gets the better jump. Prost relieves, lets him take the first spot, follows in behind him, and the race continues. 4 laps later, Gerhard Berger puts it in a wall, forced to retire. The race is stopped and restarted. Now here's the thing. When they made this agreement, they didn't specify what would happen on restarts.
They just said the first time you hit turn 1, not every subsequent time.
Right. It was just for the start of the race. Nobody said anything about the restart.
Fair game after this.
So that being said, Alain Prost this time getting the better start. He goes in expecting to be uncontested for turn 1. In comes dive bombing the corner Ayrton Senna, and this infuriated Prost. As now he's got this young buck who's not going by the initial rules that they had set, which, I mean, to his point,
you probably should, you should still be full on every time you get in that F1 car.
You should.
Odd that he maybe not let off the gas, but was relaxed in that moment.
Right. So Senna gets interviewed afterwards, and he explains, well, that was only discussed for the start of the race.
Very clear.
Nobody said anything about the restart, therefore it doesn't count. Okay.
Technically not wrong.
Prost didn't think so. So Prost was suspicious, by the way, during this entire time that they were giving, McLaren that is, was giving Senna the better car.
We've heard this.
You hear this all the time. Here's where it gets wild. The CEO of Honda comes out and says that Senna, in fact, did have the better engine. Prost's car used more fuel and produced less power than Ayrton Senna, meaning he was heavier and not as fast.
Didn't we hear that? Okay, the pay drivers of today. Didn't we hear Lawrence Stroll say that about Lance and Vettel's car? Didn't we hear Mazepin say that about the other Haas car?
Yeah.
Didn't we hear Latifi say that about the other Williams car?
Which is why your first initial reaction is, sore loser, come on.
Yeah.
But until the CEO of Honda,
we gave him. We get the better car.
Who's the engine providers for McLaren, comes out and says, "Oh yeah, no, we definitely gave him a better one."
It's a twist.
Oh no! When I first read this, whenever I was doing the dive on what was going on in this season, I was like, "There's no way you're telling me the CEO of the engine provider of the team came out and said publicly that they produced a better engine for Senna." I mean, I don't think that's something that's not only going to happen in nowadays time, but I don't think it's something that could happen ever again. That's something, I mean, you would get lit up, fired immediately.
If you had budgetary constraints, I could see that. One driver running the upgraded engine, one driver
So they
not.
give it to the young up-and-comer in his first season?
Well, yeah, that situation, no. But one driver running a different package than another, I could see that.
So here's the thing. Ayrton Senna had a very good relationship with Honda. And I believe, me personally, this is just me, I believe that's why he had the better engine.
He had the better PR relation with them.
Right.
Okay.
So, like I said, we're in 1989. In the very last race of the 1989 championship, the final race decided the championship between the two McLaren drivers. The two drivers collided. So they collided with each other causing Prost to retire from the race. Senna was able to continue, but here's the deal. A bunch of guys, marshals, jumped on the track, started pushing, which I think is what you were talking about a minute ago, started pushing Ayrton Senna, allowing him to continue, and he continued on to the race, fought back, won the race, which means he won the championship. There
were no rules in the 80s.
Wrong. He was disqualified.
Yeah.
Because you can't come out and push a car.
Nope.
You can't come out and have somebody help you push a car to get it started.
And the marshals who don't work for the teams.
Nope.
They work for the track.
Why are they doing that?
I don't know. They thought they were helping.
Yeah, well, they helped him all the way to a disqualification, which allowed Alain Prost to take the world championship that year. So already we're sitting here, 88, Ayrton Senna, 89, Alain Prost. They're trading off.
So Prost is ticked that Senna comes in, gets the better car, has the better jump on the championships, and now Senna's ticked because his championship gets stolen by some guys pushing his car.
Right. Pretty much. The FIA deemed it a disqualification because of the path that he took to get back onto the track, as well as the assisted help that he got during it. In 1990, Prost makes the move to Ferrari, right? Leaves McLaren. He's tired of all the crap. He's done with it. So in this season, in almost the exact fashion, in the second to last race this time, still Suzuka, which by the way was the track where that happened in 89. Now we're in 1990 at Suzuka. It's no longer the last race of the season. It's the penultimate round. Okay. So it's right before the last one. The exact same thing happens. So Prost gets a better start. In second, passes Ayrton Senna. But this time, Ayrton Senna chooses not to brake. Runs right into the back of Prost, takes him and Prost out. Senna takes home the championship.
I believe we saw Max Verstappen run into the back of Daniel Ricciardo and have both cars explode.
Senna took home the championship. It'd be like if you saw that Max and Ricciardo thing play out, but then Max brings home the championship because of that.
Yeah.
History
repeats itself.
I'd be ticked. So Prost was quoted as saying what he did was disgusting. He's a man without value.
Oh, a man without value.
Yeah. The following year, Senna actually admitted that it was premeditated. And he did it on purpose as a retaliation for the previous year where Prost had done it to him and won the championship.
You've just been waiting for that moment.
Right? Like,
year.
Who is this man? So because of all this, Prost decides, hold on. Prost has a lot of criticism in this following year. The year is now 1991, and Ferrari produces a terrible car. So Prost, because of this, criticizes the car and the team, and at the end of that season, he's gone. Which is fine because he finished fifth in the standings, and McLaren wasn't even having a good year at that year as Senna finished fourth in the standings. So it's one of those things, right? Yeah. So in 92, Prost leaves. He retires. Ferrari fires him, and he's like, I'm not coming back. I'm done.
Sure. Not for $22,000.
He decided not to compete in 1992, and Senna in a non-competitive car, it looked like the rivalry was pretty much over. But it wasn't, because now we're entering 1993, and Prost returns to Formula One, this time on Williams. Now, here's where the controversy is. Senna wanted to leave McLaren to go to Williams because they had the dominant car, and Prost specifically put in his contract that they could not have Ayrton Senna as the number 2 driver.
Genius.
Of course, Senna went off on him, though, called him a coward, talked about you can't have all these aspirations of wanting to be the best, come back and win, and not want to go against the best in equal machinery.
I know Senna kind of sounds like the young, annoying, whatever, but I kind of agree with everything that he's saying.
I agree with that.
The race restart thing, you never specified on a race restart we couldn't do that.
Yeah, but it's
I
agree.
To me, that's the mind of a true racer. Now, I'm not saying Prost wasn't a true racer.
That's the mind of a true lawyer. We're going to take what you said and we're going to bend it.
I'm going to win at whatever cost.
Right.
That's what that was.
Yeah, and it's hard to argue with that because that's exactly what happened. So the rivalry continued. We have Prost and Senna continuing to trade wins. Prost on Williams, Senna still on McLaren. At the end of that season, Senna finishes second, and Alain Prost brings home his final F1 championship. So at the very last race, this is kind of that heartfelt moment. At the very last race, Alain Prost finished second, Ayrton Senna finished first, and Ayrton Senna actually grabbed Alain Prost, pulled him up to the top step, and they both shared an embrace and, a nice moment up on the top
Punched
step.
him in the
chin. In the final race of the season.
I do like how a lot of the driver stories end general. Like, I think it goes back to that thing. You look at football players, and they're all buddies off the field, right? Or basketball players, all friends off the. But once they get on the field, the court, the whatever, they hate each other. And once you're in a season, once you're in that mindset of it's you versus the world, they do that. But then once their season's over and they kind of reflect on everything, they're like, he wasn't that bad.
Right, which is why I wanted to finish off this rivalry with this last piece. So obviously the rivalry was over the second that he pulled Prost up onto the top step, right?
Sure.
So it's the next season. Senna's driving for Williams now. So it's a few days before the incident. Is what we're going to call it. I mean, it is what it is. So it's a couple days before the incident, and Ayrton Senna greets Prost, who's now a pundit for F1, by coming over the message and saying a special hello to our dear friend, Alain. And I specifically put that "my" with the space because that's what he said. He said a special hello to my ... our friend, Alain. We all miss you, Alain, which was touching message for Alain to hear, obviously, because it's the end of a rivalry, the greatest rivalry.
Like I said, I think they're in the moment in those seasons, and
it is. It's heated.
It's their. I mean, it's not only their livelihood, but it's their lives on the line.
It's their legacy.
And then once they get out of it, they're like, all right.
Well done, man. So on May 1st, 1994, Ayrton Senna was in a horrible crash at the San Marino Grand Prix. In his Williams car.
Yep.
And this unfortunately took his life. Prost was a pallbearer at the funeral, but remained silent for the next 4 years. So after 4 years, he's finally interviewed, and he kind of touches on this. And he specifically said, I didn't want to touch on this in the past. I was purposely not talking about it. And he said, when Senna died, a part of himself also died. That's tough. You got to think these two were competing, pushing each other to their absolute limits when nobody else was pushing them for the entirety of their careers.
Like every time they were talking, even when it was about contracts, it was about the other one.
Oh, exactly.
The fact that Prost had the idea to write Senna out of the Williams contract.
Right. And the fact that he even left McLaren to begin with to go to Ferrari.
They were on each other's minds for 10 years or whatever it was.
Oh, 100%. And for it to go out like that, that's touching, man. It sucks. I mean, you hate to hear what happened to Senna, but the love is there from Alain Prost, as he watched his arguably greatest rival and honestly probably one of his greatest friends, because you develop a relationship like that as he watches him at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix.
I think it's tough for the commentators today. Anytime they see an accident, especially like Martin Brundle, who was an F1 driver, like the feeling or like what that guy's going through on the track.
Or even you've seen from previous seasons. We've had, the death toll in F1 is dramatically
right. They had that F2. They had that F2 driver a couple of years ago, and that hit all of them.
All of them.
Yep.
All right, so that's what I've got for Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna, one of the greatest F1 rivalries in history. Tell me about yours.
That would be Michael Schumacher and the great Damon Hill. Hey everyone, Thomas here, co-host of Turn 1 Podcast. Thank you for watching our first installment in our Rivalry Series, where we covered Alain Prost versus Ayrton Senna. We did plan on this being a full-length episode, also covering what you just heard at the end, Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, but due to time constraints, you can say the length of this episode is already kind of up there, so we decided to split it into a whole new series on F1 rivalries. If you have any thoughts on rivalries that we should cover, whether they be team-based, driver-based, principal-based, company-based, whatever they might be, let us know. Send us a Facebook message or a comment on our YouTube page or TikTok. We'd be happy to cover those in future installments of this series. Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode when we cover Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill's great rivalry in the 90s. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you.